how spring's coming up, and if you already have hives, it's a busy time of year. We have Jeff Hancock, former president. He is a master gardener. He is a journeyman beekeeper, and he has all kinds of good information for us tonight on swarms, splits, and supering. So, Jeff Hancock.
Can everybody hear me with this on?
No.
Am I clear now? Yes. Better. So tonight we're going to talk mostly about splits, why you want to do splits, and then we're going to talk how to avoid having to do splits, and just managing your hives overall. So why do we want to do splits? Okay. A lot of reasons. You want to get more hives. It's an easy way to increase your apiary without buying bees. You just create your own. Some people do splits to breed queen. They're getting old queens, they do a split, the bees will make their own queens, and they use the new ones to replace the old ones and stuff. More production. If you do your splits at the right time of the year, there's no brood in the hive, thus the bees aren't, all the nurse bees aren't taking care of babies, larvae and stuff. They turn into worker bees and they go out and they forage and stuff. So there's more bees to actually go gather the nectar and all that. So you can increase honey production by doing splits at the right time of the year. To create nukes for cell. Remember, a swarm is a natural thing for bees to do. It's good for bees to swarm because that means they've got everything they need in their hives in order to reproduce themselves. And they do that by swarming. So a swarm is your old queen, and a third of the hive approximately will just take off once they feel everything in the hive is filled up, good to go. There's plenty of resources, and you'll see the swarm cells in there, and they'll go, and that's a good thing. But as a beekeeper, especially those of us who work, you're not home during the day or every day to watch your bees swarm. And it's nice to catch your own swarm so you don't lose your bees. So, as a beekeeper, unless you're purposely trying to produce more bees by doing splits, you try to prevent swarms so you get more production. Because, again, when those bees leave, you're losing production because the amount of bees that aren't there anymore to gather the nectar and the pollen and stuff. So, swarm prevention is critical. And that's one reason. Varroa mite control, those of you who went through the short course recently and everybody else, one of the biggest problems we have maintaining a healthy population of bees is the amount of Varroa mites in a hive. And when you do a split and you have queen interruption, meaning the queen isn't in their lane, all the cells open up. Varroa mites lay their eggs typically in the drone cells, but the other cells too for the females. Well, if there's no cells for them to lay in, for the eggs to go on, so those baby larvae of the varroa mite can feed on the larvae of the bee, it stops their production also. So it cuts down the amount of varroa mites in your hive. So that's another good reason to do splits, is for mite control and stuff. Some people do splits also because they like comb honey, and if you do like a cut down split, a lot of people do a cut down split, it's called, for comb honey production. Timing is critical. Timing for your splits is critical if you want them to be effective and not lose both the mother hive and the new hive and stuff. Got to have appropriate resources, all right? If you're going to do your own splits, and maybe queens aren't available to add into your new hive or your split, you've got to make sure you have drones available. So don't try to do any splits until there's drones coming out of the comb and stuff, because if there's no drones there, chances are there's no drones up in the drone area, in the drone zone where the virgin queen can go mate. So creating a queen at that time is a waste of time because there's nobody to mate. If there's mated queens available later in the year, June, July, you can do a late season split. not have all the time delay of creating a new queen and just put a mated queen in there and stuff. And when we go to the Doolittle method and stuff, we'll talk about that more a little bit. You want a healthy hive. You don't want to try to split a small hive. You don't want to try to split a hive that is lacking resources, whether it's the amount of bees, the queen's not laying right, there's no resources available, there's a nectar flow isn't going yet. So you want to make sure you have a healthy hive. If you do it before the main nectar flow, this is where it takes advantage of you getting greater production for honey, because as I mentioned earlier, you take that split, you move all your open brood over, you keep your cap brood in there, they're all going to hatch out. Nobody needs to take care of the cap brood. The nurse bees have to take care of the open brood. All right, the eggs that haven't been, the larvae that haven't been capped yet. So all those bees now, as they hatch out, plus all the nurse bees that were in there, can now immediately skip 3 or 4 stages of their duties in the hive and just start foraging. So you're doubling your workforce for foraging if you do it at the right time. And before swarm cells are present. All right, so in a hive, you're going to hear the term swarm cell. Typically, again, when I said bees swarm naturally. So a swarm is a natural thing for bees to do. It's a planned event. All right, the bees know when the hive gets all filled up and there's no room, and it's what we call honey bound or whatever, meaning all the frames get back filled with honey and the queen has nowhere to lay. All right, the nurse bees will start chirping and things like that, saying, hey, we got nothing to do, you know, it's time to go on. And they'll build swarm cells because it's planned. So when you go out there doing an inspection, if you have swarm cells, all you really need to do is tilt the box, because the swarm cells, this is not an absolute. Nothing with bees is an absolute. But swarm cells will normally be along the bottom of the frame and it'll be sticking down in the gap. So you can go out there and just go like that and typically see if you have swarm cells. You could have a thing called supersedure cells, meaning the queen is failing, you crushed her when you were doing an inspection, something happened to her. That was not a planned event. This is an emergency replacement. Supersedure cells typically will be up in the middle part of the frame and stuff. So if you have supersedure cells, you might want to look and see if you even have eggs. Because if you don't have fresh eggs or very young larvae, chances are you don't have a queen anymore. So they're using the resources they have. And that goes back. You got to have the resources. In order to do splits, you either have to have eggs or you have to have larvae that's 2 days or younger. If you don't have that, you can't do a split because the hive doesn't have the resources to raise a queen and stuff. So keep that in mind. All right. If you try to do a split, once you have swarm cells in there, chances are they're going to swarm anyway. All right. Now you can go into your hive and you can call out all the queen cells, because you read some places where they say if you remove the queen cells, they no longer have the ability to swarm. Well, remember, it's not the new queen that's swarming, it's the old queen. All right. She still has her mind made up that she's going to swarm. So you can kill all those swarm cells, and chances are you're hurting yourself, because if that old queen swarms, now there's nothing left in that hive for those bees that are left behind to make a new queen, because they're beyond that window of eggs and young larvae and stuff. If you get swarm cells, probably the best thing for you to do is what they call make mini splits. So you just, all right, I got swarm cells here, I got swarm cells here, I got swarm cells here. So you can have 10, 15, sometimes I've seen 20 queen cells in a hive. So you take some of these swarm cells, there might be 2 in this frame, and put them in their own little nuke box and make a little split. Some people will have just a 2-frame box, so they're just taking a queen and another frame of resources in it, and they're raising queens. All right, it's an easy way to make queens. So my advice to you is hedge your bets. Don't call the queen cells. Take some of them and keep them. Now, life cycle of the queen. The queen is typically capped at 7.5 days from day of laying, 7.5 days. So as we get into late February, early March, mid-March, as a beekeeper, you should be out there expecting weekly almost, if you want to prevent swarms. Because again, once the swarm cells are developed, it's going to be really hard to stop them from swarming and stuff. So you want to take care of any remediation, i.e. doing splits and that, opening up your brood chamber before you get swarm cells. But if you do get swarm cells, take advantage of them. And if you don't have, every beekeeper should have extra woodenware. 1, so they can do splits, and 2, so they can capture swarms. All right. So if you don't have that extra equipment, you don't have that ability to be flexible. Resources. I got the resources I need. I'm thinking about doing split. But what kind of split do I want to do? There's all kinds of splits out there. You can do a walk-away split. You can do a cut-down split. You can do the Doolittle method. And then I got a new one that I'll talk to you through, the Marie method. And if you go online, there's 3 or 4 or 5, 6 different kinds of ways to do splits, and a lot of them have to do with the contraptions on the inner cover. You know, a lot of that is done in Europe and stuff like that. Typically in America, we do walk away and cut down. They're basically the same, but they're done slightly different and stuff. So what is a walk away split? All right. So I got what I'll call my mother hive. So I go into my mother hive. I go out there to my apiary and I have my mother hive. Okay, this is the hive I want to split. I'm going to go through, I'm going to find 1 frame of fresh eggs. All right? And I'm going to move it to my nuke box or into the new hive that I want to go to. Then I want 2 frames with honey and pollen. So you're probably going to have your brood chamber typically at the center. So you come to the outer frames. Okay, I got honey, 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 honey. Okay, good to go. You put that on the outside of that. Again, I have my eggs and stuff in the center. And then you grab a couple more. Oh, 2 frames of cat brood, I'm sorry. And then just another one. Making sure you didn't take your queen. All right? Because this is a walk away. All right? Not a cut down. So a walk away. When you go into your hive, you want to always find your queen. Set her to the side. You can take a nuke box, something out like that. If you find a frame on it, put her in there. You don't want her exposed for too long. You don't want to get her chilled. Or you can take a queen trap. They have cages and stuff like that that just go on top of the comb and you can just trap her and stuff. All right, just keep her pinned down. Find your queen. If you don't find the queen and you accidentally move her, it's all right. Because you're leaving eggs and stuff back here. So you're just going to have it in reverse. So you always make sure the resources, you want resources in both ones. All right?
Did you shake your bees off, or did you just put the bees straight in?
I put all the bees in there, and then I'm going to come in here, find frames of brood, and I'm going to shake, and remember brood, because that's nurse bees. I'm going to shake extra nurse bees, and I might go to 2 or 3 hives, depending on how strong this hive is, to find enough nurse bees to shake in there. And then I'm going to put my cover on this, and I'm going to walk away. I'm doing nothing. I'm letting the bees do their thing. I will advise you this, though. Come back 5 days. Again, we talked about that queen cycle. All right. Bees can make a healthy queen with larvae that's less than 2 days old or fresh eggs. Any larvae that's more than 2 days old, they have quit feeding royal jelly to. So it's not going to be a good queen. So you go in here and you look at 5 days. And I say 5 days because if you got cat queen cells at 5 days, that means they're using a larvae that's more than 2 days old to make a queen cell. Because queen cells are hatched, capped at 7.5 days. All right? So if you go in there at 5 days and there's a cat queen cell, that's an old larvae. Chances are that queen cell is going to be that big. It'll be like a little nipple instead of the big healthy one like a big peanut. All right? Call those out. Take them, get rid of them. All right? Don't destroy your good, healthy queen cells. And the reason why you want to call that little one out, remember, it's older than the other ones. So you got this little runny queen in there who's like 2 days ahead of the other nice, big, healthy queens that are growing. Well, it's going to hatch out first. And then it's going to run around the hive and kill all the nice queens that are getting ready to hatch out. Because that's what the queens do. They kill their competitors. And then you got stuck with a runny little queen. So go back in here, day 5. Remember, day 5, call out all the bad queen cells and leave the others alone. Now again, if you want to make mini splits and you go in here and you got 2 frames of queen cells on it, you can take one and make another little mini split to bank queens if you want. Alright? But typically it's called a walk-away split because you're doing nothing with it other than letting the bees raise their own queen and manage itself. And then once that queen comes back and she starts laying, then you probably want to take it from a nuke box or whatever and move it into an 8-frame, 10-frame box and let them build up and stuff. Because all this should be built up by then. Queen hatches out typically 16 days. She's in the hive for 2 or 3 more days, getting strong enough to fly. Depending on the weather, her mating flight's going to be a couple days. She might have to go out a couple times, and then it'll take her a while. So it'll probably be 3 weeks before you see the queen laying in here and stuff. So just a rule of thumb. 20 days, 21 days, somewhere in there. Then you should see eggs and things like that and young larvae. All right. Any questions on what a walk-away split is? Now, you'll read in the books. You got to go 2 miles away if you don't want the forager bees to come back to the parent hive and stuff. That's all right, because what you're trying to do is create queen. The nurse bees are not going to leave open brood. Nurse bees will always stay more loyal to the brood than they will to the queen. It's the foragers, the worker bees. So you could take this walk-away split. This is my apiary, and I could put it right here. All the workers that you accidentally moved over here are going to come back to this mother hive, and that's fine because you still got the resources necessary for this hive to do what it's supposed to do and stuff. And then when that queen hatches out, she goes out, gets mated, and comes back. Then all the bees that she starts raising then will be loyal to her and stuff. So don't worry about the drift too much. All right, you don't need it. Some of you aren't going to have the ability to take a hive 2 miles away or something like that. So you're going to have to get drift. You might, when you come back and inspect for nurse bees and stuff, you might have to shake more nurse bees in here in case you lost too many of them and they went back and stuff. So just keep an eye on your population.
Can nurse bees fly? Nurse bees.
Nurse bees can fly.
They can fly.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, once they're hatched out, they can fly.
Okay.
So,
Tell them
absolutely.
what to do with your mother hive.
I'm sorry?
You push them to the
Or-
sun. Tell them.
Right. So I removed hives in here. Okay, so as I removed hives in here, this is a good way of opening up what we call a brood chamber. So now I can drop empty foundation in here, just like this. Or Michael Bush, the way he likes to open, this is not part of the raffle, by the way. Michael Bush, because he likes small comb, natural comb, and most of the comb you buy from the manufacturers has a larger print, cell print, so they make bigger bees. The smaller the bee, he will tell you, the less likely you're going to have a row of my issues. All right, so D goes with natural. That goes back to Michael Bush's Natural Beekeeping. It's a good book. If you develop in your library, I recommend you buy the book. But he'll just take an empty frame and drop in there, because then the bees are real busy because they got to build all the comb up and everything. So, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, if you look on the internet or in the books and stuff, they'll describe a walk-away split as you've got 2 brood boxes, you make 2 hives, one with one brood box, one with the other, without looking for the queen. that may work, it may not work. But just say you got to look and make sure you have eggs in each box so that they have the resources to make it clean. And that way you've got a better chance of having a success.
And this goes back to everybody who recently went to the short course, and those of you who haven't gone through any formal training yet. We always advise you to have 2 hives minimum. Because even if you do everything right, again, the bees don't read books and they won't necessarily do what you want them to do. So if you got that second hive, they didn't get requeened the way you wanted, you can always come over to your second hive, take a frame of eggs, come back over here and try to get them to do it right. All right? Because early in the year, you're not going to have mated queens. So the only thing you can do, especially if you're doing early splits, is to add more eggs in there. Otherwise, that hive. Remember, once they're queenless, they're going to just start dying out. And what you don't want to have, you don't want to have them go to a point where a laying worker. So when the bees, the queen pheromones are no longer in there, one of the other worker bees will step up to be a laying worker. And when you pull out a frame, chances are you either have a lot of eggs in a cell or you're going to have nothing but drone comb. All right, and drone comb sticks out a lot more than a regular worker comb. If you have nothing but drone comb in there, you know you got a laying worker, and it's hard to get rid of them and stuff. So always do the proper remediation to avoid that and stuff. All right, any other questions on a walkaway split?
Laying workers have not mated, so all of the
only thing they
babies will
can
be
lay
drones.
is unfertilized eggs, which will create drones. Drones are haploids. They only got half of the DNA, the chromosomes they need. Mated queens can lay both a fertilized egg, which will become a worker bee, or a queen, or a unfertilized egg. The queen can turn it on, turn it off. And the unfertilized eggs will be the drones. All right?
Yeah.
So for the new nuke that you just made, because they only have those 2 frames of honey pollen, you need to feed them because they don't have foragers, right?
Correct. But again, feed them as necessary. All right? But you're moving resources with them. You're moving honey and pollen with them. So for that brood, remember, once that brood gets capped, you don't have a queen yet. All right? So once that brood gets capped, those nurse bees no longer have a job. They become foragers and stuff. So within less than a week, everything in there should be capped, and all those nurse bees are now foragers, while they're waiting for that queen cell to hatch out and that queen to get mated and come back in. So again, you have brood interruption here, which helps with your varroa mite control too. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if you had to feed them because they didn't have foragers.
Feed as required.
Okay.
Feed as
I
required.
can't read that far.
Yeah, you might not have to feed it because again, once they're capped larvae doesn't need to be fed. All right, so those nurse bees will become foragers and stuff. All right, any other questions on walkaway? Okay, a cut down split. All right, cut down split done a little differently than a walkaway. You're going to go into your parent hive and you're going to go through and move all open brood. Now, this is the type of split I would do a week, 2 weeks at the most before the main nectar flow. All right, and the reason I say that is you're taking all the open brood. So there's no requirement for the nurse bees that are left behind here or any bee to feed any brood. All right, so they can all start foraging. So you take all your open brood, you go through, you find it, and you move it. Okay? You move into your new box. You retain all the cat brood, some of the honey, and a frame of eggs. So one frame with some eggs on it. All right, because you want to leave them the resources. And you move the queen. And so I moved your queen to the new hive, along with the open brood, except for one frame of eggs, because again, they got to have the resources. And then you take this, you can set it to the side, whatever, next to it, you can move it 2 miles, whatever you want to do. In the same way with this one, so you kind of did it in reverse. You moved the queen this time instead of moving the eggs. I mean, you moved the eggs, all the open brood, and left some eggs here, just in case. You get the queen over here, eggs over here, all the open brood, so there's nothing but cap brood here. They're going to make a queen with those eggs. So there's going to be an interruption in your old parent hive. So you're going to have brood interruption. It helps for varroa mite control. Also, there's no brood in here anymore to take care of except for that one frame that had some eggs in it that they'll use to make the queen. So all these bees in there have nothing to do as they hatch out then go out there. Because typically the bee, they go through, they hatch out, the first thing they do is housekeeping duties. They clean out their own cell and all that. Then they become a nurse bee. Then they become a guard bee. And they got like 7 different jobs they do before they become a forager. Well, if there's nothing for them to do, they go from step 1, cleaning up their bed, or making their bed if you want to say, to foragers. Because there's no, except for the guard duty and stuff. There's nothing to do. So you got all these bees that normally would become nurse bees, things like that for a while, are out foraging now. So this is a good way of doing honey production, increasing that. And this is one of the methods, the cut down split, especially if you're putting in empty frames, is a good time to get your comb honey, because some people do comb honey production and they sell it and stuff. I don't know too many people around here that do comb honey and stuff. You do comb honey? Okay. There's some people out there that love comb honey.
It sells at twice the price, and it's a
Yeah, I never got into it. You kind of like back in the kid when you had those little wax bottles and stuff, and you know.
Everybody reminders of grandma's biscuits.
So anyway, so cut down split is just kind of opposite. Again, I will advise you in your parent hive where you have the eggs, your old parent hive, at day 5, go in there and check queen cells again. All right, and remember, because you took the queen out, this was not a planned thing. So the queen cells will probably be more supersedure cells. They'll be more up in the middle of the hive and stuff. But they will put queen cells anywhere. You might have just a little itty nipple thing way up here, or so you got to go through every frame in detail if you want to get rid of the bad queen cells. And you can eliminate queen cells, or you can pull them out and bank queens. I would not go down to 1 queen only, even though whoever hatches out first is going to kill the others, because again, they're virgin queens. They have to go on a mating flight. All right. When they're on a mating flight, they can get eaten by a bird. They can get hit by a truck. They can get caught in a thunderstorm. Dragonflies will be all over your yard once you start keeping bees. Dragonfly might snag your bee. There's a myriad of things that could happen to that queen when she's out there mating and she's coming home. So,
Procedures if you want to.
yeah, I'll go ahead and just pass this around. These are a couple pictures of queen cells, so you know what they look like.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So you said about you move the open brood and retain the cap brood, but if I recall in a lot of my inspections last year, very new beekeeper, I don't recall a cell that had just either or. It would have a little bit of both, right?
Not necessarily. If you got a queen and she's really doing a good job, you can pull out a frame like this and it's solid cap brood.
Okay.
Now there'll be a period of time on this frame you might have a combination of capped and uncapped, but she's moving. So this frame, once it's capped, and I've had frames, I mean deeps, both sides, 6 of them, nothing but solid brood, all capped. And now she's up in the next box. All right, so that's a cut down. Again, cut downs would be more the type of split I want to do for honey production. All right, because my parent hive, my original parent hive, has all the workers in it with nothing to take care of but to go forage and stuff. All right, the Doolittle method. All right, so the Doolittle method, you got your parent hive, and you have double deep brood chamber. All right. Or you have one brood chamber. You're going to take 5 frames of brood, some open, some capped, no bees. You're taking every frame off, brushing it off. All right. But you do want both capped and uncapped brood. All right. And you're going to put them in an extra box. All right. You're going to take 5 frames out of here, put them in a box. Once you got that done, and then you backfill it, of course, with empty frames or foundation or whatever. Now you're going to place a queen excluder over your original hive. Okay? You're going to take the brood chamber that you moved the bees into, and that queen excluder. Alright? There's no bees in here. There's just open brood and cap brood because you brushed all the bees off. Because there's open larvae up there, open brood, the nurse bees that you brushed off will migrate up into this box. Alright? They'll migrate up there because, again, the nurse bees are loyal to the open brood, not necessarily the queen at that time, because it's their instinct to take care of the queen. So you let that happen overnight, whatever, just come back the next day. Now, you'll come back, wait a day or two as it says, and then you're going to take this box, because now you got the resources up there, all the nurse bees moved up there and all that, and you're going to take this box, and you're going to move it over. This is the a dual little split is a type of split I would do after the main nectar flow when mated queens are ready. That way you're not burning a lot of time. They've been on top of their old queen, so her pheromones are still in there. They haven't had the need to create a queen because those bees are moving up and down through this queen excluder. So her pheromones, her QVCs, are still permeating through these bees too. All right. But once all the nurse bees, a couple days that they got up there and they've kind of righted the ship, if you want to say, take this, have a mated queen available, and then put that queen in there, and it'll keep them from swarming or from creating a new queen. Now, say this was your old queen. She's 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old. All right? You got a mated queen, or one of the other techniques where you created a queen. If you don't want a lot of bees, you just want to prevent swarming, then later in the season, what you can do, you take your original mother hive, or one of the other hives, lay a couple sheets of newspaper down. Make sure there's no queen here. You paint her away. If she's your old queen and you know next year she's probably going to be swarming or she's starting to fail and they haven't superseded her yet, kill that queen. You got a queen over here. Take this box. You got the newspaper separating it. You put it back on there. That queen's up there. It'll take a while for the bees to eat through that newspaper. Now you combine these two back into one hive. Because by the time it takes them to eat for the newspapers, this queen's pheromones is working down through that box, and they're going to recognize her. All right. So you can split your hives and put them back together. So as you go into the fall, if you have a weak split or you have a weak hive, you can combine hives through newspaper techniques, and there's others, but newspaper is the easiest to do. You just take a couple sheets of newspaper, lay it on top of one, put the other one on top of the newspaper, and you combine it. And then maybe later on collapse this down. When you should have bees on almost every frame, all right, to have a really strong hive. And if you're going to winter and you only have bees like on your 3 metal hives and all this is open and there's nothing down here, this is way too much space for 3 frames of bees to guard, to protect, and to keep warm. So you might want to take those 3 frames, keep them in here, or take them down to a nuke, whatever the case, or just take the bottom box, take whatever bees are in there, brush them off in here, and go down to just one 10-frame box for the winter and stuff. Because you don't want the bees to have too much space that they can't control. Because if they end up down here, or they end up here clustering, then wax moths can come in down below here. Hive beetles will start taking over, all kinds of issues. If they're down here and you've got to open say your top cover is tilted or whatever, they'll come in here because there's not enough bees to guard this area, so they'll come in. So you never want to give your bees too much space, but you always want your bees to have enough space to keep them from swarming. So it's just knowing how many bees you have, how many frames are not covered, etc. Okay? So do a little method. I don't know if I would ever do a little method if I didn't have mated queens to do that. And I probably would not do that for production purposes. I would probably only do that for a later season split where I know there's still enough stuff they can gather. Yes, Bob?
I think I'd make sure I still had warm nights to do the little.
Correct. So that's true. That's true about all splits, because remember, when you're taking a split and you're taking your population and knocking it down, you should be looking at the 10-day forecast at least, especially if you're going to do an early season split. We've had the last few years, February, the queens have really built up. We'll have like a week of good weather. It's actually probably been the last 3 years we've had a window where the hives have really built up, and then we have a hard freeze for like a week. Well, what happened then is the bees are trying to protect the queen, and they're trying to protect the brood at the same time, and they don't cluster like they should. They're too spread out, so they're not keeping the queen warm. And a lot of times that's when you have a die-off. And you'll go in there and you pick a frame out, and all you see is bee butts sticking out because, one, they starved to death because of the period of time they were in there, and two, they just couldn't keep themselves warm. So you might have a frame of dead bees in it, and 2 frames over is a full frame of honey. But because it was too cold and they couldn't move, they couldn't get to the resources themselves because of the time clusters. So that's been one of our problems. We've had some bad winter kills the last few years here in Virginia and stuff. So I got another method I want to talk about. This is the Marie method. This goes back to what I was talking about, recombining hives. So this is my original brood chamber. A lot of people run 2 deep, some people run 3 mediums, whatever. But say I'm running a 2 deep. I'm going to take one of my deeps off. Alright? I got my old queen. I'm going to make sure she's down in here. I'm going to take a queen excluder. I'm going to trap her in. Alright? Then I'm going to take honey supers and I'm going to separate my 2 brood chambers. Alright? And some people should say, you won't see it, so yeah, you will. And, well, this was your old setup. So this was your old setup. I had 2 deeps, my honey supers, queen excluder in between the deeps and the honey supers, and this is a new setup. Now some will say, put another queen excluder in between. The picture doesn't say it, and the reason why is to keep the virgin queen from getting down into the supers. Some people don't mind that. Some people who run all deeps will just interchange. All mediums will just interchange the frames. So, what I've now done, I have the old queen down here. I have a queen excluder. I have honey supers, queen excluder or not, and the resources up here to make a new queen. Alright? So this is one of my brood chambers. I made sure I had eggs, larvae, cat brood, etc. So basically, I move this up here. Now you can either drill a hole, let the bees come and go from up here. You can tilt your telescoping lid so there's an exit for them. But what's going to happen is this hive body up here, this brood chamber up here, is going to create a new queen. You're going to have a queen here. You're going to have a queen here. honey supers in between. So, depending on which book you read or whatever, or article, you just keep adding honey supers in here because you have a queen here and a queen here. Well, they're just going to both work in the middle and stuff. It's a way of slamming production and stuff because you basically have two hives in one and stuff. Now, at the end of the year, once the honey flows over or the nectar flows over, you're getting down there. This queen's old. You got a new queen here. Go down there and paint it, pull the thing out, have the paper in between it, and you recombine your hive into one hive. Or you can take her and move her off and stuff. But that's called the Demery method. I think I pronounced that right. So supposedly it's a way of increasing honey production because you got two hives basically working the honey supers at the same
Not
time.
interrupting.
Right. And you have brood interruption up here, so it helps with the varroa mite control and stuff. So it goes food for thought. Strong overwintered hive. Success breeds success. If you're constantly buying packages of bees and you keep them for a year, maybe 2 at the most, and then they're dying, do you want to just keep throwing your money after the same bees? If you get one of your hives that overwinters and it comes out strong, that's the hive you probably want to then start splitting to produce more beehives for you. That's the way you want to go instead of buying bees. All right. Splitting swarm cells. I mentioned this. If you take swarm cells and you split those swarm cells, I take some and put it in a nuke, and I leave some here. They could still swarm on you. All right. So you have to be careful about that. Again, they have that tendency to swarm. Some queens, they might be there for 3, 4, 5, some up to 7, typically not that long, but there's been cases of that. And some, they just swarming. And you'll have consecutive swarms out of that same hive. Make sure they got the resources, account for drift, know the weather, I said, keep good records. Good records keeping is critical for beekeeping, especially when you're tracking, I did my split this day, so I should be checking my queen cells day 5. So because 7.5 days, a queen cell's capped. From the day the egg is laid until it's capped, 7.5 days. That could change slightly, depends on the outside temperature. So if you're doing a summer split or something like that, the hotter it is, tends to speed up the life cycle of the bees half a day or so. So it could move up just a little bit. So everything could move up slightly. And then be patient. You did your split. You had the queen cells. Again, 16 days for the queen to hatch out. Give her a few more days to get organized, build up her strength. A couple days for mating. So we're talking 20 days at least, 21 days. And you go in there at day 30. Just for the heck, I'm going to wait for 30 days. And there's nothing in there. And you go in 5 days later and there's nothing in there. And you're thinking, they didn't requeen it. She didn't make it back. I'm not seeing anything. Well, a couple things might be going on. One, she got delayed to go on her mating flight because you went through a week of thunderstorms, so she didn't want to leave the hive. All right. 2, there's now a dearth going on, meaning there's no resources for the bees to collect. So depending on the type of bee it is, if it's like a buckfast or some of the others, if there's no resources for them to make bees, they won't make bees. Italians will make bees no matter what. Okay? They don't care. Those Italian queens, they'll slam. Here's the problem though. You need pollen, not nectar. You need pollen to make bees. That's the protein. If they're not getting pollen, that Italian queen will keep laying, but the bees need pollen, protein to make other bees. What will happen is they'll start with the eggs, eat the eggs, then they'll eat the uncapped larvae. They won't eat the uncapped larvae, because that larvae no longer needs to be fed. It's going through the metabolic. But if there's nothing out there for them, they will start eating themselves. And that's why you, doing your inspection, you're looking. Are they bringing pollen? You're looking. Are they bringing pollen? So you're going into your hive doing your inspection, and typically the brood, where the brood is, you'll have some honey, you'll have some pollen, but on the outer part of the hive, you'll maybe have honey, and then frames of pollen, or pollen-honey mix. And when you're looking at that, you should have red, orange, green, blue, all kinds of different colors of pollen. Because if they're doing that, then they're getting a balanced diet, because all pollen is not created equal, and not all pollen has the amino acids bees need. So they need a combination of different pollens to have a complete diet and stuff. So that's something you need to be looking for. So if you're not seeing egg and you're not seeing brood, then you have to do what else is going on that could be causing this. Did I have a delay? And then you have to go look for it. And hopefully you don't have a runny queen, because if you have a runny queen, it's hard to find. Hopefully you got a good, big, healthy one, and she's easy to find. So food for thought. There's a lot of things to keep in mind. Record keeping is important. Any other questions? So that was splits, and why you want to do splits and all that. Now, say you don't want to do splits, and I'll go into this real quick. There's different ways of trying to do. The biggest thing to prevent swarming is to keep the brood chamber open. So you make the bees think they haven't done everything they need in order to swarm. There's still unfinished business. So you go in occasionally and make sure you might be pulling out a frame of honey, dropping empty foundation in. Or like Michael Bush does, he likes to drop empty frames. No foundation, no nothing, because that makes him even easier. So he'll pull frames out and drop empty frames in. Now if you're worried about whether they're going to build this out right, put it in between two frames that have drawn out comb. And then they can only draw it out right, because they don't have excess space on either side to get crazy. A lot of people with plastic foundation might have the bees build everything on one side and nothing on the other side. Some people like plastic foundation, some don't, because of the way the bees build on it and stuff. Another method you can do to open up the brood chamber or above the brood chamber is checkerboard. So when you're checkerboarding, you're coming through frame of honey, empty frame of honey, empty frame of honey. What you're doing, you're going in there, and above the brood, you're putting every other frame as an empty frame, making the bees think, I still got work to do and stuff. So that's called checkerboarding, when you do every other frame. And you do that right above where the brood is and stuff. So checkerboard above that. So that's one way. People will say clip the queen's wings, and they can't swarm because she can't get away. They'll still swarm. She'll just be laying on the ground someplace, and all the bees will be with her because she couldn't fly away. But they'll swarm. If they want to swarm, they're going to swarm. It's just she can't fly away and stuff. That'll delay things. Hopefully she's right there so you can find her. Maybe she's under the box or something. But, you know, if you're gone for a few days and they swarm and she's out there and you get a thunderstorm out, who's to say she's going to survive? So, now I've had some bees. I had a swarm one time in an oak tree right next to my house. They actually stayed on that limb for like 7 days, and 2 days of it was rain before they finally decided to take off. But they were so damn far up in that tree, I was not going to climb up there and get them. I say, adios, amigos. You're way. They were 40 feet up in the air, way out on a limb, and I'm not a squirrel, so I wasn't going to go after them. So, but yeah, the key to preventing swarms is open up the brood chamber. And there's a lot of different ways to open up the brood chamber. Again, go online. Michael Bush, Randy Oliver, all these people, they all have ways of doing it. And just try them. Depends on your bees. Every type of bee, whether it's Russian or Buckfast or Italian, they're all a little different. So you have to learn how to manage each one differently and stuff. So, any questions? Thank you. That's all I got for everybody. Appreciate it.